We will now start with the land acknowledgement. Echoing. We acknowledge that we are on the lands of the nation. One second, we got an echo here. Okay. We acknowledge that we are on the lands of the Anishinaabe Nation. The spot where we gather is the traditional land of the Three Fires Confederacy, the Ottawa, Potawatomi, and Ojibwe. We recognize that this land is home to the Delaware Nation. This land was settled through the McKee Purchase Treaty of 1790, and we, as beneficiaries of the treaty, must recognize our responsibilities, including our collective responsibilities to the land and water. Mr. Mayor, there's no supplementary agenda this evening. We do have two councillors currently attending online, Councillor Allen and Councillor McGrail. Councillor Story currently is absent. Rules for the council chamber. The municipality of Chatham-Kent supports open meetings that welcome debate of public policy issues in an atmosphere of inclusiveness, integrity, civility, fairness, and respect for differing points of view. Anyone conducting themselves in a way that disturbs, disrupts, or impedes the orderly conduct of the council meeting, interrupts or makes derogatory statements or hate or defamatory comments about councillors, staff, speakers, or fellow members of the public may result in removal from the premises. We ask that you do not approach members of council if they are seated in their council seats and around the council horseshoe. The use of posters, signage, and literature is also prohibited. So, Mr. Mayor, we do not have any conflicts of interest this evening as well.
Okay, we'll go over to Councillor Bondi to introduce the band.
Well, my pleasure, Mayor Caniff. Thank you very much. And I want to start by saying I grew up a couple of blocks from Tecumseh Park, so this has been a part of my life all my life. And with that, I'll give a brief description of the band. The Chatham Concert Band was founded in 1927. Originally the Chatham Kilty Band, it was primarily a marching band, although concerts were provided in a small band shell in Tecumseh Park near the armories. From the beginning, the band was financially supported by the municipality. This support continues to this day, making the band the longest continuously operating municipally funded band in Canada. In 1867, the band moved its summer concerts to the new Kiwanis Band Shell at the other end of Tecumseh Park, where even today the band continues its summer series of concerts free to the general public. This tradition has never missed a summer, even during World War II and the COVID-19 pandemic. The band has had 4 conductors during its 98-year summer concert series. Current bandmaster Vaughn Pugh has held the position since 1984. In fact, as these 5 band members sit before you tonight, a regular Monday night rehearsal, one of 48 per year, is underway at the band practice room with Mr. Pugh waving the baton. The 5 members of the quintet in front of, I don't know if I said that properly, so I hope. The 5 members of the quintet in front of you tonight are John Lee, baritone sax, Patrick Bates, trombone, Heather Morwood, French horn, Bill Patterson, and Dave Brown, trumpet. Between them, they represent over 150 volunteer years with the band. Remember, live music is best. Join us, them, every Wednesday night all summer long in Tecumseh Park for the 7 p.m. concerts. Bring a lawn chair, bring a friend, and have a lot of fun. And now the quintet will play 2 quick numbers. Number 1, this is the most fun I'll have. Never Smile at a Crocodile. Can't say I've heard it before. And number 2, Alley Cat. Thanks very much.
What a great way to get the council meeting started. I'd like to say this is the first time ever, before announcing the Agricultural Hall of Fame inductees, that you had a band perform beforehand. So,
So next is our recognition, the announcement of the Agricultural Hall of Fame inductees for 2024.
That's a tough act to follow. Good evening, Mayor, guests, councilors. My name is Alice Ewer. I am the Vice Chair of the Kent Agricultural Hall of Fame. I am here on behalf of our Chair, Rick Yolton, who is unable to join us on this evening to announce this year's inductees into the Kent Agricultural Hall of Fame. Each year, the Kent Agricultural Hall of Fame receives application forms from individuals or organizations for inclusion into the Agricultural Hall of Fame. 3 gentlemen who have provided a positive influence on agriculture in Chatham-Kent community and beyond will be inducted into the Kent Agricultural Hall of Fame on Tuesday, November the 19th of this year at the Hidden Hills Golf and Country Club in Unga. The day will begin with a meet and greet at 11 o'clock, followed by the presentation of 1 or 2 of the biographies, and at 11:30 we'll have lunch, and ending the day with the final presentation of the last biography. Tickets can be obtained by calling Catherine Vanek at 519-683-2929. Now our 3 nominees. Stephen Denise of the former Township of Chatham is a passionate agriculturalist who has been deeply involved with the farm community in crop production, protection, marketing, and seed development for over 50 years. Congratulations to Stephen Denise. The late Harry Lawson of the former Township of Zone worked to change bylaws and regulations to benefit the agricultural community, including working toward fair settlements for gas and hydro corridors across agricultural land to avoid expropriation if possible. Congratulations to the family of the late Harry Lawson. The late Keith McLean is our 3rd inductee. Keith was from Morpeth, Ontario, and was an active learner of sustainable farming techniques. He stressed the importance of balancing agricultural land and natural cover, and emphasized using windbreaks and cover crops to reduce wind erosion. Congratulations to the family of the late Keith McLean. And that completes this year's list of inductees into the Kent Agricultural Hall of Fame. Hope to see you on Tuesday, November the 14th of this year. Thank you.
Mr. Mayor, we received no deputations for items on the current agenda, so we will go to the consent agenda. The following items have been pulled for discussion. 16C, sole source bed replacement for Riverview Gardens, pulled by Councillor Sakachi. 16D, sole source supply and installation of Unimac washers and dryers, pulled by Councillor Sakachi. 16E, sole source medical equipment replacement for Riverview Gardens, pulled by Councillor Sakachi. 17A, 2024 Fire Master Plan. There is a presentation by Dylan Consultant and also pulled by Councillor Doyle. 18A, Municipal Encampment Protocol. There's a presentation by administration and has also been pulled by Councillor Sakachi, Councillor Doyle, and Councillor Jubenville. And 21B, motion by Councillor Sakachi regarding support for primary health care access points, pulled by Councillor Sakachi. Therefore, the following reports will be approved: 15A, 15B, 15C, 16A, 16B, 16F, 18B, 19A, 20A, 21A, 22A, and 22B.
Tonight, the consent agenda will be brought to you by the letter H. Councillor Hall and Councillor Harrigan, can I get you to move this?
So moved.
And seconded.
Any questions? Seeing none, we'll put it to vote.
Councillor Allen
Yes.
and Councillor McGrail.
Yes.
All votes are in. Motion passes 17-0.
Item 16, tender awards.
We'll start with 16C, sole source bed replacement to Riverview Gardens.
Councillor Scotchy.
Thank you, Mayor Caniff. I actually have a motion that I want to bring forward in regards to 16C, D, and E, that report 16C, D, and E be referred back to administration, and that administration be directed to undertake competitive bidding process for these items. And if I do have a seconder, I will speak to that.
Councillor Doyle.
I'll gladly second that.
Floor is yours, Councillor Scotchy.
Thank you, Mayor Caniff. Just wanted to start off by saying by no means do I have any intention to question, the report or the diligence that took place during the report process. It's just that the amount of money totaling these three reports is quite a bit. It's nearing $750,000. I understand the consistency for branding and standardization and familiarity from a maintenance standpoint. I just have a little bit of a hard time just trying to see if these reports are within the market range still. Just a quick question to whoever who may be available. By making this motion, though, I just want to make sure that it's not going to affect operational matters. That's the last thing that I want to do, is to affect operational matters by pushing this off.
Thank you, Councillor, for your question. Through you, Mr. Mayor, I'm just going to get a nod at staff. I don't believe that it will cause any operational issues. It will just delay some of the processes, but it won't cause any operational issues per se. So no concerns from that perspective.
So do you know if the delay will be any cost, like will there be potential additional costs if it's delayed in regards to the pricing components, or how that may look?
I don't believe so, no.
Yeah, so I just wanted to finish up to say, like I said, I'm not trying to question the diligence that's taken place in the report. It's just myself personally to approve these three motions, seeing no current cost market comparisons. It's just very hard. I know it's coming in from reserve, some of the purchases, but I just want to make sure that we're being as diligent as possible and ensuring that we're spending the taxpayers' money to the best of our ability. That's all my comments, Mayor Caniff.
Jody, do you want to make some comments?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I just wanted to make mention of the fact that there were tenders that were done previously, some years ago, albeit. And as a result of the equipment that was selected at that time, that's the reason why there have been subsequent reports that have been brought forward to council to sole source, and that's the reason why we brought it back. I hear and I understand what Councillor Sakachi is saying. I believe that the products that we do have will be more efficient, will cost less in repairs at some point in time down the road when we need to bring in repairs, and it will simplify the processes and will be far more efficient. So I will offer those comments to you for consideration.
Councillor Doyle, do you have any seconder?
No comments from me.
Councillor Harrigan?
Thank you. Through the mayor to Jody and or team, there was a note in the report about quality and safety best practices. Can you speak to, because we are using currently, at least for the beds, so I'm looking at the reports, the one is for beds, the one is for medical equipment and supplies, and the other is for laundry machines, I think was the third one. So I'd be fine to go and test the market for laundry machines, but can you comment on patient care and outcomes around kind of similar equipment? Because I know in other healthcare areas, you're kind of committed to the brand for a consistency and safety perspective. Is that also true in long-term care?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, yes, it is true. As an example, the lifts that we have in the bedrooms are interchangeable. We're able to consistently ensure that the residents are being lifted properly. Also, we're able to move the lifts from room to room as required as well, because we are using the same consistent brand of equipment as well.
So if this stays on the floor, I'm wondering if we can just separate them. I'm supportive of going to the market for laundry machines. That takes a little bit of staff training on how to change do the laundry with equipment. But for things that are touching patients, like the beds and equipment supplies, then I wouldn't be supportive of it for the reason of quality.
Councillor Hall?
Thank you, Mayor Caniff. It might be, thank you for the comments to Councillor Harrigan's questions. I guess I see in the report, and I think you touched on it too when you first spoke, but it says that, this is to replace 65 beds. So I'm just looking at the first report here, that replacing things that are past their life expectancy and parts are no longer available. So I guess, if we pass these three things, what, in terms of timing, I guess, like, if we were to support the recommendations, when would we be able to get this equipment in? And conversely, if we, pass the recommendation to defer it, how much of a delay, I guess, or how much time is gonna take before this equipment can be replaced?
Thank you, Councillor Hall, for your question. Through you, Mr. Mayor, I'd like to ask staff to come up to respond to that question. I'm not sure of the time. And if I could ask Rick Walker, who's our Supervisor of Maintenance, and Jessica Francis to come up. While they're just coming up to the podium, I'll maybe just take a moment to introduce Jessica Francis to you. She is our new Director of Long-Term Care at Riverview Gardens. Welcome, Jessica. We've done a competition, and I think it was last week that Jessica took that role on. Mary Alice continues to be here until the middle of July in a supportive role, but Jessica is the director. So in response to Councillor Halls, I'll turn that over to you, Rick. Thank you.
Mr. Mayor. Through you, Mr. Mayor. Beds take these days, about 3 months to produce, 3 to 4 months. So the tender process would probably delay it a couple months. So it could be 5 to 6 months before we get the beds.
Okay, thank you. And I guess another question too, I know you mentioned, Jody, about, how this has went out to tender in the past. I don't know exactly when that was, but when would you go back to that? Or like, when would that decision, or how would that decision be made, I guess, internally, to test the market, I guess, with this, as Councillor Sakachi's asking? When would that be something that would happen internally, or would that need to be a direction of to staff from council, or how would that be determined?
Thank you for your question, Councillor. Through you, Mr. Mayor. I think that's a great question. We did recently, we're replacing the last of the beds at this point in time. So if we were to go out to tender now, it would be the last several beds, and I'm not sure what the exact number is, but this has been over a course of number of years that we've been replacing the beds at the home. So this is the last batch of beds that need to be replaced. So it would be quite some time that we would start that process again for the beds. With respect to the lifts, I would strongly suggest that the lifts that we are currently using, for consistency's sake, probably we need to stay with those ones. When we look at the life cycle of the lifts, and when we want to start replacing all of the lifts, you're talking a significant cost to be able to move into that direction. I don't think that we could do that. A washers and dryers, probably a little easier and a little bit more, probably less resident risk for the washer and dryers.
Okay. Thank you.
I just have a couple questions, and I'll pass it over to Councillor Scotchy for final. Just maybe Jody. I have a few questions. I guess when we look at sole supplier, that means that this typically is a very specialized item, and there's really nobody else selling it. So first off, did we look to say the cost consistency? We did put them all out to tender previously. Are we comfortable with the I know there's inflation between there, but looking at what you went out to tender earlier, is it a consistent pricing, factoring in inflation?
Yeah, thank you, Your Worship, for the question. Through you and to council, I would say yes, I am comfortable with that, and I'm comfortable with the equipment. Staff have a great deal of trust in the equipment. There has been a process that has been used in the past to be able to get us to where we are today with using that equipment, and I'm very comfortable with that.
And the second, is there other suppliers of these brand names? So whatever the name of the bed is there only one supplier, or is there different dealerships that would all be selling the same thing so they would compete? Can you help me on that one?
There's only one supplier. There's nobody else that will supply that brand.
So if we put it to tender, they would be the only ones bidding on it?
That's right. And when we originally did the request for an expression of interest or request for information, we tried a number of different beds at that time, and the bed that we are currently using is the second, it was our second choice. We've tried a few of them, and this one is the best that meets the results and meets the residents' needs as well.
So that's with the beds, and what about the lifts? So is that a similar scenario for the lifts?
I'll have to ask staff to come up. I think the lifts were there since Thames View Lodge days. If I could ask Rick and Jessica to come up, please. I don't want to provide misinformation, sorry.
Through you, Mr. Mayor. We have been using Arjo equipment since Thames View Lodge days, probably about 30 years. So, and when they built the new facility, it was furnished with all Arjo equipment. I wasn't part of that, so I'm not sure what happened.
So with the lifts, is it consistent then there's only one supplier of that type of lifts?
Yes.
Okay. So my last question following from that is that, does this impact the tender? So if we put it out knowing that there's only one supplier of the beds, for instance, could they come back and say, well, the bed was 5,000, now it's gonna be 6,000? Like I'm curious as to if they're the only supplier, that's why we're approving those two, and I'm excluding the washer and dryers, because I'm assuming we could put different ones in, but would that impact the tender process in your mind?
To re-tender, they could up the price. I don't think they would. They usually hold prices because we do a lot of business with them, so they could do it though.
Okay, no, that helps clarify for me on the lifts and the bed replacement, and say the washers and dryers. We could theoretically have a different brand in there, like that there's not a big issue with parts, all the other reasons we'd have the other two. If we had two different washing machines in there, what would the impact of that be?
Just staff being able to go from one wash to the other and hit the right buttons on it, because they're like computers now. So it would just affect that. Second would be a footprint of the washing machines. We can get away with a little leeway. The dryers, it has to be a certain width, because we can only fit the 7 dryers in the spot that they're in.
And with the washers and dryers, is the brand name only sold by one supplier?
Yes.
So again, it's the same as the other two, that it's not 12 different places are selling the same washers and dryers. Thank you.
Thank you.
Councillor Scotchy, final words?
Yeah, thank you, Mayor Caniff. Actually, a lot of the questions that you just mentioned, I did speak with Jody about today when we spoke on the phone, and I just wanted to put a little bit of clarity. So being familiar with things and, having common things are fantastic, and standardization things are fantastic, and being comfortable is fantastic, but it's also fantastic for the people you're buying the things off of as well. So the whole goal was the motion was just to ensure a couple of the dates that were referenced was actually July 2nd, 2022. So essentially, we did go to tender 2 years ago. There's a large part of me that feels that not much would change, but when we're talking about machines like washers or dryers, standardizing the actual brand name to one company, I can't say that that's necessarily a great thing. Does everybody want to have a matching washer and dryer that works exactly the same? Probably, and I didn't want to go down to the weeds on this in this detail, but hearing some of the comments, and I didn't expect it to be likely supported by council. My only effort with this process is I just wanted to ensure that at least if we've seen the numbers, if there was additional training, we could see that those numbers from a cost perspective, and we could just be making a decision based on the actual costs on a piece of paper. Patient-facing care equipment, obviously, as Councilor Harrigan said, is extremely important. I just was not comfortable supporting something that was tendered 2 years ago because of the fact that in the report, it talked about being standardization, consistent brand, familiarity with maintenancing, sole distributor, choice of beds. I understand all that. I just wanted to ensure that we were doing diligent from a governance standpoint, ensuring that those costs were still specific to those items and within the ballpark. So, looking forward to seeing the vote. And as I mentioned, I did not think that this would probably garnish council support. And just in closing, I would like to do 16 C, D, and E separately then, just because of some of the comments that I've heard. Thank you.
Okay, yes, we will be separating the three of them. So we'll have three separate votes. Okay, so we're voting, the first one is 16C. This is the bed replacement.
Councillor Allen
No.
and Councillor McGrail.
No.
All votes are in and motion is defeated 3-14. So next we'll do 16D. So it's the sole source supply and installation of Unimac washers and dryers. Councillor McGrail
Yes.
and Councillor Allen.
Yes.
All votes are in and motion passes 9-8. And lastly, 16E, sole source medical equipment replacement for Riverview Gardens. Councillor Allen
No.
and Councillor McGrail.
No.
All votes are in and motion is defeated 13-4. So now because the referral of 16C and 16E failed, they will need to vote on the recommendations in the report to approve the sole source.
Councillor Harrigan and Councillor Hall, can I get you to move this, please?
Thank you. Can I move them both at the same time? 16, okay. All right, so I will move the recommendations for 16C.
So seconded.
Any questions? Seeing none, we'll put it to vote.
Councillor McGrail
Yes.
and Councillor Allen.
Yes.
All votes are in, motion passes 17-0. And 16E.
Councillor Harrigan and Councillor Hall.
I will move the recommendations.
So seconded.
Seeing no questions, we'll put it to vote.
Councillor McGrail
Yes.
and Councillor Allen.
Yes.
All votes are in, motion passes 17-0.
Item 17, Fire and Emergency Services.
The 2024 Fire Master Plan, there's a presentation by Dillon Consulting.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'd like to introduce Suzanne Charbonneau-Dent from Dillon. Those of you who have been on council for a couple of terms will recall this has been going on now for about three to 4 years. We had a community risk assessment completed in 2022, and Suzanne is now coming back with the finalised master fire plan. The idea behind this presentation is we want to bring to you the concept, and then in future years and future budget processes, we can bring to you some of the details if it comes up through implementation. So right now, this is for the information of council, and it hopes to form the strategic document for, I would suggest, the next 10 years, maybe more. Have I filled enough time for you there, Suzanne?
Thanks, Chief. I'm pleased to be with you this evening to discuss the Chatham-Kent Fire Rescue Master Plan. The Master Plan report is the final deliverable in the project, which also developed a community risk assessment completed in June 2022. The findings of the risk assessment informed the Fire Master Plan, and the Master Plan report is intended to provide Council with a multi-year strategic framework for the delivery of fire protection services within the municipality. The project was founded upon a comprehensive data collection process, as well as a broad and extensive stakeholder consultation program. This included a project steering committee with representatives from Chatham-Kent Fire and Rescue Management, career firefighters, and volunteer firefighters, as well as municipal staff and other departments. We held one-on-one interviews with key staff in the fire rescue side, as well as interviews with the Chatham-Kent Professional Firefighters Association president and other municipal staff members. We held virtual engagement sessions with the volunteer firefighters, conducted targeted community stakeholder interviews with groups such as St. Clair College, the Chatham-Kent Health Alliance, Lower Thames Valley Conservation Authority, the Chief of Delaware Nation, and social housing groups. We conducted online surveys for community members and both volunteer and career firefighters as requested by the association. And we delivered a council workshop, a presentation of the community risk assessment, and a closed session presentation in October 2023, and today's presentation to Council. The master planning process identified a number of organizational and operational challenges within Chatham-Kent Fire and Rescue. But to set the stage, we'll briefly review the existing conditions of the department. The current organizational structure is comprised of both full-time staff, management team and career firefighters, and volunteer firefighters. With the exception of the fire chief and 4 assistant chiefs and the 3 administrative positions, all other 72 full-time staff are members of the International Association of Firefighters Local 486. There are currently 322 volunteer firefighters within the 340 complement positions, and there's an ongoing recruitment to fill those, all the 340. The current organizational structure is, by definition, that of a composite fire department, meaning that the department is comprised of less than 85% majority of either volunteer or career firefighters. The department provides emergency response to the municipality's nearly 2,500 square kilometers of geography from 19 existing fire stations. 2 operate with career firefighters only in urban Chatham. Wallaceburg has both career firefighters and 10 volunteer firefighters assigned, and there are 16 volunteer fire stations, both surrounding Chatham and located in many of the smaller communities. Many stations were built prior to amalgamation, and there are outstanding organizational and operational challenges that remain from that historical change. The Establishing and Regulating Bylaw, referred to as the ENR Bylaw, provides Chatham-Kent Fire and Rescue with the authority to deliver a wide range of fire protection services, including fire prevention, suppression, technical rescue, public education, fire investigation, and training. This document will need to be updated as changes are implemented resulting from the Fire Master Plan. It's important to understand that today, and historically, although Chatham-Kent Fire and Rescue is comprised of both volunteer and career firefighters, the current operational services are not fully integrated. There are numerous examples where career and volunteer firefighters work and train independently and differently and are not simultaneously deployed together, sometimes not achieving the closest station response that's typically delivered within a fire department. Pre-amalgamation challenges continue, including a lack of standardization across the department, from fleet and equipment to facilities, and the culture that stations consider themselves more connected to their local area or community than within the broader department as a whole. The magnitude of these challenges is not typical for a composite department. Though we often see organizational cultural challenges remaining after amalgamation, the barriers and geographical segregation within Chatham-Kent is unique. Through stakeholder consultation, we heard feedback from firefighters that some believe there should be two separate fire departments, one career and one volunteer. Under one municipality, that's basically unheard of and would not provide the best service and value for the community. It does raise the cultural issue that there is a divide that exists between your career and volunteer firefighters. The current deployment model does not automatically dispatch the total number of firefighters, both career and volunteer combined, based on the fire risk as recommended by applicable industry best practices or National Fire Protection Association or NFPA. Though the department has been trialing a two-station response for just over a year now. The current collective agreement of the career firefighters restricts the use of volunteer firefighters in the Chatham and Wallaceburg areas. In Chatham, the current deployment model relies on the request for a general alarm to call back all available off-duty career firefighters before deploying your volunteer firefighters. A fully integrated composite fire service operating model would automatically deploy both your career and volunteer resources simultaneously based on the fire risk present, for example, a single-family dwelling. The department is managed by the fire chief and 4 assistant chiefs, which is unique to Chatham-Kent. Typically, we would see 1 or 2 deputy chief positions between the fire chief and assistant chief levels. The existing organization of the operations division is shown in the slide. Career stations 1, 2, and 3 have 1 senior captain, captains, career firefighters. Wallaceburg Station has 10 volunteers who aren't paged out automatically, but instead based on a judgment call by the local captain. That process is flagged for change within the FMP. The volunteer stations have volunteer station chiefs, volunteer deputy chiefs, volunteer captains, and volunteer firefighters. The Fire Master Plan recommends strategies to revise the organizational model to align the rank structures between the career and the volunteer firefighters. The recommendations reflect a fire management team with the fire chief, deputy chiefs, assistant chiefs, and introduces new full-time district chiefs with 2 on duty at all times, captains on the career and volunteer sides, acting captains, career and volunteer, and firefighters, career and volunteer, to represent a rank structure that is consistent with career, composite, and volunteer stations. The report introduces strategic priorities as themes throughout the document. Ideally, to support the direction of the Fire Master Plan, Council would adopt these strategic priorities, at least in principle, to provide overarching guidance to the future of the department. The first strategic priority is that the municipality of Chatham-Kent is committed to supporting the transition of Chatham-Kent Fire and Rescue into a fully integrated composite fire operating model. This strategy follows Council's strategic plan, specifically the priority to grow our community that includes developing and implementing the Fire Master Plan. There are existing challenges with the collective agreement to achieving this. For a municipality with the size and structure of Chatham-Kent, with urban centers surrounded by large rural geography, a fully integrated model would provide the most efficient and effective service delivery model. Achieving this will require the support of Council, the municipality's leadership, the Chatham-Kent Fire and Rescue Management, and department stakeholders. This may seem like a simple priority, but it's a significant change from the way you do business today and how other departments operate across Ontario. Many of the plan's recommendations are focused on moving the department towards the success of this priority, and new provincial legislation provides an opportunity to consider such significant change. And that's the topic of this second strategic priority. New provincial legislation provides a foundation for the municipality to review and revise the current fire protection organizational structure and operational capabilities to deliver the most effective and efficient level of fire protection services, resulting in the best value for the community. So this strategy supports the transition to the fully integrated model and responds to Ontario Regulation 37818 for community risk assessments and Regulation 34322 firefighter certification, which requires all firefighters, both career and volunteer, to be trained and certified to the same standard across the province. Strategic priority number 3, the municipality is dedicated to prioritizing strategies that support the sustainability of a fully integrated composite department, including recognition of the historical commitment of those who have dedicated service to the community in the past. So this strategy acknowledges the history, dedication, and culture and commitment of your current and past staff, including volunteer firefighters. And while supporting the need for the fire rescue to revise the organizational structure and fire service delivery model, it also acknowledges that sustaining your volunteer firefighters is critical to the success of a composite operating model. Culture within the fire service is extremely strong and powerful, and it must be taken into consideration when implementing organizational change. As well, sustaining the volunteer model requires keeping the volunteer firefighters engaged and having them feel valued and included in the department. The fourth and final strategic priority, that Chatham-Kent Fire and Rescue identify and implement services and programs to optimize the first 2 lines of defense, including public education and fire prevention, and the utilization of fire safety standards and fire code enforcement, and in this case where the 3rd line of defense is your emergency response or fire suppression. So this strategic priority is in most proactive fire master plans that we prepare. It applies key concepts of risk reduction, which are adopted across the industry. And the strategy supports the municipality's goal to use the new community risk assessment to provide comprehensive fire protection for the community. Based on our review and our feedback from stakeholders, your community life safety programs, including public education, fire prevention, and your community partnerships that are involved in all those programs are a strength of your existing department underneath your current management team. The plan identifies for each division recommendations and strategies. Now, some require the authority of council to implement, such as those with operating or capital budget impacts and those related to policy decisions. And some can be implemented by the fire chief through his delegated authority. Relating to the administration division, it is recommended that the department update the vision, mission, and core values statement, as well as your establishing and regulating bylaw and policies to support your transition to a fully integrated fire department. That Chatham-Kent implement strategies to respond to the identified existing workload and capacity challenges for your department's senior management team, and that the municipality revise the current organizational structure of the fire and rescue based on the considerations and recommendations in the master plan, and as part of implementing a fully integrated composite fire service operating model. And finally, that the department investigate opportunities to enhance the existing administrative support, which would further balance and improve the administrative workload. The recommendations and strategies for the Community Safety Division respond to the findings of the Community Risk Assessment and also to optimizing the first 2 lines of defense. And for this, it recommends the development of a formal fire prevention policy as well as a community risk reduction strategy. It also adds a full-time equivalent position with an administrative position to minimize the admin tasks currently assigned to the more technical fire prevention and public education staff. So an example of this is that your current fire and life safety educator spends a significant amount of time scheduling requests and events and other activities that could be offloaded. So what we're seeking to do with this recommendation is really improve the effectiveness of the resources you have today. The plan recommends adding a fire inspector, 1 new FTE, to respond to the identified risks such as vulnerable occupancies and migrant worker housing. As well, there's an additional fire and life safety educator full-time position recommended to enhance those first 2 lines of defense and address risks such as your growing seniors population. For the training division, we recommend that the Fire and Rescue Service continues to enhance the current firefighter training program to include in-house certification, to provide the mandatory firefighter certification requirements of Ontario Regulation 34322 for all firefighters, both career and volunteer. We further recommend that the department identify options to provide annual live fire training for all career and volunteer firefighters and develop an implementation strategy for consideration by council. We also would like to review the resource needs of the division and as part of the updated comprehensive annual training program, look to consider hiring an additional training officer, again, one full-time equivalent, able to have, in this case, a flexible work schedule that allows for more opportunities to work with the volunteer training initiatives. And as well, we look to implement alternate firefighter training models, such as a trainer facilitator or a train the trainer model, and also consideration potentially of online training tools for the theory-based portions of learning. Also, under the training division, the master plan recommends that Chatham-Kent Fire and Rescue reconsiders all current technical rescue training and response protocols based on the findings of the risk assessment. And this would also aim to comply with the firefighter certification legislation. So typically, this type of service and this type of call comes with a high cost to deliver, but usually represents a low frequency of calls. So options for consideration in the plan are to provide awareness level training for all career and volunteer firefighters, to develop dedicated specialized technical rescue teams, to consider automatic aid agreements with neighboring fire services where appropriate, and to investigate potential private sector partnerships. Under the operations division, we recommend that the department develop and implement a revised fire suppression deployment protocol. And this would reflect that optimized, fully integrated composite operating model and look at the fire risk present. This would see us simultaneously dispatching the closest available career and volunteer firefighters. We would also recommend that the municipality prioritize the development of a financial strategy to implement the 2 district chief positions. And again, those would be on duty full-time. So that would relate to a total of 8 staff positions in order to keep that 24-hour-a-day coverage. So we would be looking to implement this as soon as fiscally possible in order to support that operational and administrative needs as we look to transition the model into the composite fire service. As we heard in stakeholder consultation, there are existing challenges and barriers today. So should council support this movement to the fully integrated model, we can expect that there will be more, certainly in the short term at least. And the aim of the district chief position will be to play an essential role as a change manager, and both operationally and culturally. So we would look to have them become really the glue that brings together the sides of the career and volunteer components of the department. So we are recommending the implementation of a revised fire suppression deployment protocols, which would also include performance targets. So the FMP uses NFPA 1720 as the applicable target. So this has 2 pieces that are applied in Chatham. So it has the urban demand zone in Chatham urban area. So this targets 15 firefighters arriving on scene within a 9-minute time for turnout and travel time together. And the typical target for this is 90% of your fire suppression incidents. And then the second component is a rural demand zone, which would be the rest of the municipality outside of Chatham. And here we would target 6 firefighters arriving on scene with 14 minutes of combined turnout and travel time. And this is to an 80% target of suppression incidents. And this is the performance measures that we used in all of the modeling included within the master plan. So there are no standards in Ontario as far as emergency response goes. The NFPA guidelines are applied for training legislation, and in our experience, they are the best practice for fire suppression performance measurement as well. So the idea isn't that you try to be there today. That is an unrealistic expectation, but you measure where you are against this standard and try to continuously improve over time of where the department is. So just to give a quick review of the existing deployment performance. So on this map, the orange area shows where 8 firefighters can assemble within the 9 minutes today, and the light yellow shows the area where 4 firefighters can respond within that time. So as it sits today, only the on-duty career firefighters are initially deployed to an incident. And based on the existing deployment, the fire rescue is unable to assemble the 15 firefighters that are in the measurement today, with that combined turnout and travel of 9 minutes. So if more resources are required, again, there must be that general alarm, which would then call back all off-duty firefighters before the volunteers can be paged to respond. That's how you sit today. So this map shows the rural response area and the volunteer deployment. So the green areas show where you have 6 firefighters that can arrive on scene within 14 minutes of turnout and travel. And right now this represents only 16% of the municipality's geography. But this is where your volunteer response can achieve only. In the master plan, we look at both a 2-station model with a relocated Station 1, as well as a potential 3-station model in future Chatham conditions, considering growth. So under the future conditions, a 2-station, now this would be a fully integrated composite model, assumes the relocation of Station 1 and the use of volunteer firefighters, in addition to career firefighters, at Stations 1 and 2. So this model would also add a 3rd career apparatus at Station 1, which will be staffed with 4 career firefighters full-time. So the dark purple area on this map shows where you could achieve 15 firefighters within that 9 minutes under this scenario. And this represents 46.7% of the historic call coverage. So under this, the optimized location for Station 1, so the modeled location, is in the vicinity of LaCroix and Richmond. And this is also supported generally by the 3-station model analysis. So under that 3-station model, it assumes the same kind of ideas as the 2-station model. We're using volunteers in addition to career firefighters at Station 1 and 2, and we're adding a 3rd career apparatus. In this case, it would operate from that new 3rd station. So once again, the purple on the map shows your predicted coverage for 15 firefighters in that 9 minutes of turnout and travel, and this equates to 49.2% of your historic call coverage. So it's more coverage slightly by 2.5% than your 2-station model. Although it's not specifically analyzed, the 3-station model does increase the area of Chatham where your first arriving crew can reach in a shorter travel time. And it does also have some added cost as far as additional capital and operating costs for maintaining and building your 3rd station, but it takes into consideration some of the needs related to your future growth. So the optimal location for that relocated Station 1, in our opinion, is around the Richmond Street, Park Street, somewhere between LaCroix and William. And that's the general location that supports both your 2-station model and a 3-station potential future configuration. Now there's some flexibility there from wherever the permanent location is selected for the future 1. You could then adjust slightly where your future 3rd station would go in order to maximize your coverage once again. So the station location and staff resource options that are identified in the plan obviously bring with them a number of human resource related and capital impact recommendations. So this includes things like your relocation and expansion of Station 1, renewal of Station 2, relocating and accommodating volunteer firefighters at Stations 1 and 2, purchasing land for the potential implementation of a future 3rd station, and really managing and responding to the growth. For the operational division, we recommend developing a financial strategy for hiring additional career firefighters to be assigned to Station 1 to staff an additional apparatus. So with this consideration, the plan outlines a hiring strategy, and we see this as having the minimum staffing of 2 firefighters at all times on an apparatus would then require hiring 12 career firefighters. Where you have an apparatus that's going to be staffed full-time with a minimum of 4 firefighters, you would then need to have a complement of 22 firefighters. So this approach could be applied to an additional apparatus. So if we're talking about adding an apparatus to Station 1, you would start by hiring 12 firefighters and staffing that with a minimum of 2. And then following that, you'd be able to roll in the implementation to hire an additional 10 more firefighters to get up to that 22 and staff the apparatus full-time with 4 firefighters. So what we're getting to here is really that there's been a shift in the industry, and the numbers are now reflecting a 1.33 ratio, where historically it was a 1.25 ratio of on-duty staff to your total staff in order to keep full-time staffing for your fire department. So some of the reasons behind this is that the history is showing there's been an increase in overtime, an increase in leaves. This could be from things like WSIB, PTSD, presumptive diseases, parental leaves. There's a number of different HR-related issues that are causing an increase in the staffing needs that bumps us to this now recommended 1.33 ratio. The master plan considers strategies to sustain and enhance your volunteer model. So this includes revising the title of your volunteer firefighters. What we're looking towards is volunteer/paid on-call firefighters. And this reflects what we believe are industry best practices to more accurately reflect the role and the compensation of this position. And it also makes it more attractive to the people who might consider applying. There's also a recommendation to develop and implement a volunteer paid on-call hiring strategy. And what we look to here is a total complement assigned to each station of about 25 to 30 firefighters. So that's a bigger resource pool. And what we're trying to achieve here is having more people available to respond and increasing the numbers on scene, as well as improving your response times. Finally, we have the communications division. So within this review, there were some staffing and service levels identified for change. So currently, the services provided are not meeting all of the needs and requests of Chatham-Kent Fire and Rescue. So as such, the master plan recommends that the department consider the development and implementation of a formal fire dispatch agreement with Chatham-Kent Police Services. And so this would include having a provision for call taking and fire dispatching services to be performed based on the indicators referenced in NFPA 1225, Standard for Emergency Services Communications. And we would also be looking for the requirements for all Chatham-Kent Police Services emergency call taking and fire dispatching staff to be compliant with the training and certification requirements in that Ontario regulation 34322 firefighter certification. As we believe, all emergency communicators are recommended to achieve level 1 and level 2 of that NFPA certification prior to July 1st, 2026. The master plan also recommends that Chatham-Kent Fire and Rescue conduct a review of dispatch needs, services, and solutions, which are provided by your existing provider, and conduct an investigative review of potential service delivery options or alternatives. That should say questions, but for some reason it is not saying anything. But that's the stage where we're at.
Councillor Crew and Councillor Doyle, can I get you to just put this on the floor for discussion, then I'll open it up for questions.
I would be happy to move the 4 recommendations. Do you want me to read them out, Mayor Caniff?
Nope, I think we can just put them on the screen.
Okay, thank you.
I will second that.
Okay, so questions. Councillor Crew, then Councillor Doyle, and I'll go to other questions.
I don't have any questions, Mayor Caniff. Maybe just a couple comments. This has been 4 years, I think, in the making, and there's a lot of information packed into these slides and into this book and in this report. But I think it's very important for everyone to look at this and look at it as a roadmap for our emergency services in the future. We need to have a plan of where we're going and how Chief Case will look for operating budget dollars. So when we hear all this, full-time this, capital cost there, more operating costs, those things all come back to budget. So don't get afraid that, you're gonna be approving a multi-million-dollar budget here tonight. We are approving a roadmap for the future of our emergency services. So thank you for this, and thank you. Look forward to the implementation of this plan.
Councillor Doyle?
Thank you, Mayor, very much, Mayor Caniff. Thank you for the report. It was very well written. First off, I'd just like to say I am on Station 15. I'm a volunteer firefighter, so I'm good to talk on this, but I just want to give you a heads up on where I'm coming from. So I've got a whole bunch of questions for you. So I'm just going to start off and try to get through them as quick as we can. So currently, for Station 3, so if Station 3 gets a call in Wallaceburg, the first 4 full-time guys that are in that truck go, and then who goes to help them out or at that call?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, if we get a fire in Wallaceburg, which requires more than one truck, Station 3 full-time will attend, Station 2 Chatham will attend. If the fire is bigger than the abilities of 2 trucks, then a third will be called back on overtime, and then the Wallaceburg volunteers will be deployed under the current collective agreement arrangements.
Okay, yeah, so currently the second truck is coming from Chatham, so it's like 20, 25 minutes away.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, yes, that's correct.
Yes, okay. Okay, thank you. And then in here, it talks about emergency incidents, and it talks about how volunteers would be going to the required for the high-risk occupancies, which then talks about how it's structure fires and high-risk buildings. So can you just let me know if they're in 2 different spots, but kind of talking about the same thing. For the emergency incidents that volunteers would be called out for, can you just elaborate on what type of things those are, or would they strictly just be the structure fires and high-risk buildings?
Thank you. Through you, Mr. Mayor. The main point there is the total number that we are dispatching to the scene automatically. So who are you sending out in order to get your depth of response based on risk of the call? So that does tie back to the way that NFPA words some of their standards. So in this case, like for a single family dwelling, we'd be trying to get to that, obviously that 15 firefighters or possibly 16 firefighters, depending on the area and the risk. So really it comes down to what's the occupancy type, and there would be a protocol set by the department to determine and support the dispatchers, obviously, that if it's such and such a structure or such and such an incident, then that's the number of stations and who would be called. So if that kind of clarifies it a little bit.
Okay. And then when you did talk about the hiring 1.33 ratio, you talked about copying Vaughan. So I'm just curious why would we pick Vaughan to copy? Are we similar to Vaughan in any aspects?
Through you, Mr. Mayor. It does mention Vaughan. Vaughan was simply one of the first out of the gates. It's a large department, a leader in the industry, and the 1.33 is quickly becoming adopted by departments with full-time firefighter resources across Ontario. So it's not that you are the same as Vaughan. It's simply that, again, Vaughan was a leader, and this is something that we are seeing more and more frequently, more and more regularly. I know that Oakville has just gone down a very similar path. I would say most departments that are reviewing their staffing policies and certainly going through a risk-based process that then leads to a master plan are coming to the same conclusion, that the 1.33 ratio is necessary in order to certainly balance the costs of overtime that are being experienced because of the additional leaves that I discussed.
Okay. What does paid volunteers mean? Is it just a name title, or is there any job job
Through you, Mr. Mayor.
differences.
Again, so the big thing is how it's portrayed in the community. So if you say a volunteer firefighter and you're asking people to sign up and become volunteer firefighters, it makes it sound like there is no compensation for that. It just takes their time and they do what's best for the community. But in reality, there is a compensation model around being a volunteer firefighter. So we're really looking for a way, it's almost a piece of marketing, if you will, to just more accurately title it as it is in reality, so that when you're out trying to get members of your community to come and take part, they realize that they would be compensated.
Okay. When you're doing these type of reports, are taxes ever considered? Like how much this is gonna cost?
Yeah, through you, Mr.
Or do we
Mayor.
just do it based on service?
So certainly one of the pieces is what's financially and fiscally possible for the municipality. And that's kind of where I went with there is no emergency response standard. There's nothing that says that the municipality must have 14 firefighters, 15 firefighters, 16, whatever it is. That's certainly all a part of what is set by council for the level of service. And the important part is that we identify what's aligned with legislation and best practices, and the financial part needs to come with the implementation and rollout. And if that means that it takes the full 10 years of a plan to achieve, or however long it takes, that's the business of the annual budgetary cycle. But the piece is that the department has done its due diligence to put the review in place, realize what the risks are, what resources they ideally would have in order to provide the most efficient and effective service, and then we do our best to try and get there.
Okay, thank you. And do you know how much this is all gonna cost roughly?
Through you, Mr. Mayor. We actually, in this plan, we have stayed with, as it was said, a blueprint or a strategic roadmap. So we actually didn't go into the costing component of an implementation plan. Our understanding is that is set as a next step for the process.
Okay. And do you feel like this would be the most effective way to get this done? This type of coverage and service level increases? Most cost-effective way to get this done?
I can stand behind it all as evidence-based and best practices. And I know from my experience that a operating composite fire service delivery model really does bring the best value for a community, certainly one that is has the characteristics of Chatham-Kent.
Okay, thank you. How would this, do you know how this would affect our current fleet of trucks that we have?
Through you, Mr. Mayor. Yes, there is an entire chapter on the fleet and equipment. I obviously was trying to stay somewhat within the confines of time. So there's a regular replacement cycle, but basically the additional apparatus would be those that are listed in the scenarios where you're adding the four career firefighters to relocated Station 1. That would be the biggest impact. The other piece is looking at an overall fleet rationalization program. So knowing that you have some leftover fleet and equipment from your pre-amalgamation days, so moving towards, as you renew and replace, a more standardized fleet. But again, those are all things that come up in your asset management, regular cycles, and budgetary programs.
Okay, thank you. And then I did like the dispatching changes, and you believe that would be a very positive thing if fire has a little more control over the dispatching?
Through you, Mr. Mayor. I think the wording isn't quite that strong in the master plan. It's simply suggesting that, first of all, that there's something formal, it's in writing, that they're aiming towards a performance measure in the same way that we're asking the other divisions aim for a performance measure. That would be an industry best practice. We would see that for all emergency communicator agreements, or we would recommend it. And the other piece is just that as technology changes, and certainly as we implement some of these, like the risk-based deployment, there's going to be different needs from the communicators. So we just want to make sure that those services can be delivered, and if they can't be accommodated, then what are the other options?
Right, okay.
So, Councillor Doyle, I understand we're.
Yeah, I got one last statement and then I'm done.
One last, and then we got to cut you off.
Yep, that's fine. Okay, so I would just like to finish off by saying, just from my personal experience on the hall, it would be nice to see volunteers and full-time utilized in the way that they should be, based on the type of call and who's available at the time and who can get there the quickest, as opposed to kind of what we currently have set with standards of who can go where, when they can go there, and that kind of thing. So overall, I think this, if this works out like this, I think this is, would be a great thing for Chatham-Kent. So thank you very much. I appreciate that.
Okay, Councillor B. McGregor, followed by Councillor Scotchy.
Thank you, Mayor Caniff. Appreciate seeing this presentation tonight. And I know that this plan has been long anticipated by plenty of folks in the community. So just a brief non-technical follow-up question. So I know listed throughout the report, there's a lot of use of the terminology as soon as possible. So just understanding, we have to go through budget processes and next steps. Is there a plan for a next report in prioritizing some of these recommendations, seeing some budget numbers? I'm thinking, more specifically about the relocation of a fire station and some of the addition of staff, and when we might have some concept of associated costs and how we'll phase that in and the timelines that those might happen down. Thanks.
Through you, Mr. Mayor. As it says here, we're looking at approximately a 10-year plan. The idea for doing it in this fashion is to bring it through the budget cycle year upon year. And the multi-year budget allows us to do that planning. So yes, we're hoping that we'll bring an implementation aspect to the next budget. And then from that, we'll be able to work out. As Suzanne said, there's a lot of things in here saying what we should be doing. And I think collectively we have to work out what we can be doing. And I think we have to be realistic in what we can achieve over a 10-year life cycle.
Yeah, and I think that my request would be maybe to see some of that a little bit before we hit that budget cycle. So just in a report, a month before or 2 months before, so that we have an idea to what we might be seeing at budget and have some time to ask those questions and maybe delve in a little more fully. I know with experience now in this 4-year budget process, it can be a little weighty, and we certainly want to make sure that we can give the time and attention to what's a pretty significant issue for the community.
Thank you.
Councillor Scotchy, followed by Councillor Anderson.
Thank you, Mayor Caniff, and through you to maybe a kind of a tag team question to Mr. Quinton as well as to Chief Case. So as the province is specifically here in Ontario keeps pushing the growth mechanisms and how we grow, and also promoting growing upwards and stuff like, upwards. Obviously, there's a significant cost that when it comes to as we grow, we're going to need more firefighters as we grow, and how we grow, the stature of our buildings likely might need additional equipment. I know partners in the emergency services, let's say as we refer back to like car theft, has seen significant increases in the funding model. Chief Case, just because we're not really privileged to those types of conversations, is there any funding mechanisms that are coming to municipalities that are maybe outgrowing their tax base, so we can try to recover some of these funds? I'm just not, obviously you go to probably conferences, you speak to the different delegates, and I just wanted to see if there's conversations about that.
Thank you for the question. Through you, Mr. Mayor. I'll be guided by Mr. Quinton if there's something in the woodwork I'm unaware of, but the Ontario Association of Fire Chiefs were at Queen's Park 2 weeks ago, and as you've all heard me say in the past, police receive additional funding. Our EMS services is 50% funded, but the totality of local fire protection services rests with the taxpayer. And when you look at some of the costs of the materials we now have, the cost of fire trucks, the cost of protective clothing, we do have a big issue. And right now, the fire chiefs are advocating to the province that we need that level of help. The province has allocated 30 million between the 445 fire departments for this year. And we're assured that the words of the Solicitor General was, this is a tree and we're going to plant you a forest. Well, I hope that comes to fruition. But to make your initial point, as we build upwards, the number of firefighters you need increases exponentially. Low-level firefighting is one thing, but the minute we get into a high-rise building, that's when we really do have a perfect storm brewing here. So you make a good point. We're growing. We're going to need more fire protection services. And from a professional perspective, we are going to need some help with some big-ticket items when it comes to enabling that growth through fire protection. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Yeah, thank you, Chief. And, you know, the safety of our firefighters and our community is obviously of the greatest importance for sure. And, you know, 10 years ago or even 6 years ago prior to my time on council, you never would have imagined driving through Chatham, you know, and seeing as many high-rise buildings or multi-level buildings that we have. I think that our CIP program did a fantastic job. But with that comes additional costs, and hopefully in the future, when Mr. Quinton's team's bringing budgets and that money starts to come on the table, hopefully we start to allocate some of those funds to equipment, because a fire truck probably 20 years ago compared to what it costs now, I'm guessing that $30 million might be able to buy you a cool 10 trucks for the entire province. I'm just guessing, but anyways, thank you for your comments.
Councillor Anderson?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and through you. Thank you for this document. It's very, very detailed, and a lot of things I will admit I don't understand. So as we move forward with this master plan, which I hope we all approve this evening, there'll be lots of more questions moving forward, but I certainly appreciate the information here. I just was wondering if you were able to share, either you or Chief Case, of the vacancies. I believe there's 18 of them. Are they at the capacity of like the volunteer level, or like, sorry, paid volunteer level, or where do we find those vacancies?
Through you, Mr. Mayor. Right now, we have less than 18. I think we're probably in single figures because we've just concluded our auxiliary firefighting program. So those of you that were there on the 1st of May will have seen the new recruits come through, and we intend to do that year upon year so that people can enter into the fire and rescue world without having to spend tens of thousands of dollars on their own education. And it's testimony to council that you provide that level of support to the local community. So right now, we're seeing reasonable numbers. We're not too concerned about vacancies, and not many fire departments can say that in Ontario right now. So going forward, we'll have to recruit more and we'll have to train more.
Yeah, thank you, Chief, and through you, Mr. Mayor. I definitely appreciate that, and I think that that's testament to you, Chief, and all of your team, that people want to be firefighters in Chatham-Kent, and I definitely appreciate the respect that you get from everybody with that. My other question, paid volunteer, as I understand, right now, it is per call basis. There's not a salary that's paid for like on call. So I'll just speak to this just briefly and wonder if this was a consideration that Dylan gave throughout your assessment. As a nurse, if you're on call at the hospital, you get a set base for the hours of on call. It's a minimal amount. I think it's just over $3 an hour for while you're on call. Was that a consideration to recruit more, or is that something that could come forward later?
Through you, Mr. Mayor. So we didn't get into that level of detail, but that's certainly one of the potential compensation models. It's more often used in areas where it is challenging to get the number of volunteers. So the first step is really to increase that total complement of volunteers, and sometimes that solves the problem. If you aren't able to get the numbers, then that's where you would probably have to start looking into having more of an on-call schedule. There are some departments that use that during specific times of the year, you know, busy holidays, hunting season, whatever it may be, when it's challenging to get the right number of staff out. But that would all be kind of part of the bigger picture of that sustaining your volunteer model. So it does have number. Also, the approach to how you pay for training. So obviously, as the chief said, that is a unique way that Chatham-Kent handles that. But with the increased load of requirements with the certification, there are also possibilities and options as to how volunteers are compensated for training time. So there's a number of kind of different components as we get down into the details of it.
Well, thank you very much. I look forward to working with this master plan for the next couple of years for sure. Thanks.
Seeing no other questions, then we'll put it to vote.
Councillor Allen
Yes.
and Councillor McGrail.
Yes.
All votes are in. Motion passes 16-0.
We'll move on to item 18, Health and Human Services.
18A, Municipal Encampment Protocol. We have a presentation by Dave Taylor, Director of Legal Services, and Polly Smith, Director of Employment and Social Services.
Just while we're pulling up the presentation, if I could maybe just provide a little bit of an opener, I guess, for the presentation that Dave and Polly will be doing for us. I know that there has been significant conversation over the last little while around encampments and some of the challenges that that has been posing for area residents and businesses as well. The protocol that we're talking about tonight, I just want to distinguish that from the actual encampments themselves. And so with the protocol, what we've tried to do over the last several months is pull together a process that we can use and that we can agree upon as we move forward and try to address the encampment issues that are in existence right now. That does not necessarily equate to what else might we be able to do to address the encampment issues. We recognize that this is sort of an evolving issue. It's a new issue that hasn't necessarily been around. It's not something that was experienced 5 years ago, 10 years ago. It's not something that would have been prevalent here. And so this is our first step at trying to identify what a process might look like to address the protocols. The second piece of work I think that we need to do is we need to continue to look at how do we continue to address the issues that are presenting to us today. And I'd suggest that in the committee itself is going to be looking at what other alternatives we might be able to come up with, and that we will bring a future report back at some point in time so that we can provide some additional information and perhaps some additional solutions and options that we might be able to do to address the encampment issues that we're facing today. So with that, I will turn the floor over to Dave. I think we'll start to provide a little bit of information around the protocol and encampments, and then Polly will provide a bit more information. Thank you, Dave.
Thank you, Jody. Thank you, Mr. Mayor and Council, for the opportunity to speak tonight. Just for the public, my name is Dave Taylor. I'm Director of Legal Services for the municipality. So I wanted to give Council and the public just a bit of a kind of short form version of what we've identified here as evolving law about encampments here in Ontario. As that title suggests, we're really in a transition point in a very difficult legal landscape. So it's an evolving area and an area that really is moving kind of day to day, week to week, month to month. Even what you can see from other municipalities' approaches to this is evolving quite rapidly. And so where we're at right now is a point in time, and this briefing for council, this protocol also reflects a point in time and something that we're going to have to continue to adapt to over the years. It's a complex issue. It's one that certainly has resulted in significant tensions between property owners and unhoused persons, between businesses and government agencies. And it's not something, though, that's unique to Chatham-Kent. Throughout the province, throughout the country, and really all around the world, we're seeing kind of similar issues being tackled by all levels of government. And so while it's certainly an area that we're seeing concerns in Chatham-Kent come forward to municipal administration, to council, to all levels of government, it's one that we are seeing elsewhere, and we need to learn from other municipalities, and we're doing that as much as possible as well. Really tapped into this. I would say the administration meets on this issue at least weekly, also regularly discussing matters with other municipalities throughout the province and throughout the country to figure out how they're working to kind of tackle these difficult issues. So I wanted to give council a bit of a legal briefing about just why are we in this evolving area of law, before then turning it over to Polly Smith, who is our Director of Employment and Social Services, and will speak more about the protocol that administration has developed for responding to encampments. This really complex issue has resulted in a few court cases, as are identified on the slides there. Kingston and Waterloo are the most recent examples here in Ontario, but there actually are other cases out in BC around the country as well that have struggled with this same issue of people camping, unhoused persons staying on public lands, and what's the appropriate level of government response to that, what is allowed and what is not. The court cases are quite detailed, and certainly anybody who's interested in reading them, they're available on public databases for reading court cases. There's also a lot of commentary about them on websites on both these Ontario cases and a number of other decisions. But just in short form, to really pare it down to the kind of shortest version of what the finding of those cases are, is one, people need to be able to provide shelter for themselves. That's a necessity of life. We have to be, as humans, we have to be able to protect ourselves from the elements. And two, if there's a bylaw, a municipal bylaw, that prohibits people from using municipal land, public lands, to shelter themselves from the elements, that actually can impact and breach Section 7 of the Charter of Rights and Freedoms. Section 7 guarantees that every citizen of Canada has a right to life, liberty, and security of the person. And essentially, when the judges in those cases go through the facts that are put before them and the legal analysis, they find that for people who are unhoused, who can't give themselves shelter in another location, it would breach Section 7 of the Charter, this right to life, liberty, and security of the person, if we also say they can't shelter themselves on public lands. It's kind of their last option. That's how the court cases get to kind of the conclusion they reach, which is really in these cases, you can't, in Kingston, it was you can't remove an encampment from a park. In Waterloo, it was you can't remove an encampment kind of from a parking area or something that was intended as part of a transit facility in the future. It's because of this charter analysis. That's really to the public particularly and to councillors who are wondering why isn't the municipality doing what we might have done for people parking in on parks or in parking lots years ago and actually move them along. It's that we have this new evolving law that recognizes the deep affordability of housing issues that we have and the kind of complex other social issues on mental health, addictions, and kind of the interplay of all of those that's causing this housing issue and causing encampments all across Ontario, all across Canada, and really the world. I also wanted to just mention to Council, there's other legal issues that kind of come into play here, and one of those really significant legal issues is human rights. Because of the duties that governments owe to our citizens to respect their human rights, we have to respond in an individualized way to the human being that's actually facing housing issues. And so that's relevant because there are statistics that really show that people with disabilities, Indigenous persons, and other people who face kind of human rights bases issues might be overrepresented in the unhoused population as well. So it adds layer upon layer of legal issues when we're trying to figure out what's the appropriate response to this. All that to be said, part of what Polly is going to present today is an encampment protocol that at least gives us a framework through which we will work through encampment issues. It's not going to necessarily be a solve, rather it gives that deliberative decision-making process, the engagement of various agencies, various municipal departments to make sure that we're making decisions that are informed and we have a process to it. That's really what the protocol is all about. If we're talking about what solves the underlying cause, though, of homelessness, of encampments, those are much deeper issues, and we can't solve that tonight, and that's not what the protocol will address. That really is, we need to be looking at more affordable and supportive housing options. We need to be working with all levels of government, all aspects of our communities to tackle addictions and mental health supports. Those are like the big things. Those are the big fundamental changes that could actually make a significant difference. What we can work on in the encampment protocol is how to mitigate some of the impacts of encampments in our communities. That's really the focus. And so I'll turn it over to Polly Smith here, who's our Municipal Director of Employment and Social Services, and certainly Council, after Polly has completed her presentation, I'd be more than happy to answer questions.
Thank you, Mayor, and good evening, everyone. The protocol that we're speaking of actually has two main parts, privately owned land and municipally owned land, all included in your packages. And it has been about 18 months or so in development and has been tested in different situations over that time. Through that period, the laws changed and the case law that Dave is talking about came into play. The municipally owned land really is to help guide our work in our different departments on dealing with encampments and the people who live in them and helping them. And the privately owned land is an option based on what we saw in the last few years of interest of different organizations and businesses who maybe didn't want people to stay on their land, but didn't necessarily want to trespass them immediately, though that is always an option. I'll start with the simpler way, the privately owned land. It's the right of any landowner or representative to have people vacate their property if so desired or necessary. And they can call the police and they will come and speak to the person and remove that person from their property. In our community, we have a non-emergency line, and that's generally what people would use to report somebody unwanted on their property. But if there was something happening that was urgent, then 911 should be called. Using the protocol that we've provided for privately owned land, or even parts of it, enables people who are unhoused to stay connected to their service providers, preserves their belongings, and prevents the loss of important things like ID, medications, and ultimately assists them in their journey to become sustainably housed. We did want to touch on public land not owned by the municipality. And if a parcel of property is, let's say, federal government owned or provincial government owned, not owned by the municipality, but not necessarily private, efforts would be made by the manager of homeless prevention to contact the governing body for review, and then they would decide what they're going to do. It's believed that other levels of government would be held to the same case law that municipalities are, I think, yes. On municipally owned land, based on what we know from the case law, and what we've developed through our protocol, the steps that we would take in Chatham-Kent, identified encampments would be reported to housing services and they can be made through 311 or the main municipal number, and they would be directed to the manager of homeless prevention. An outreach team would be dispatched to the location to attempt engagement with the individuals and support services offered. I would like to note, when we offer support, it could be harm reduction, it could be a variety of things, and rapport building is a very big part of that, building trust relationships. We don't always have solutions for people, and there are sometimes the beliefs that people don't want to be housed or don't want, and that's not necessarily true. Frequently, our shelter, for example, our emergency shelter is full, as are motels in the community. But there are other supports, and keeping that engagement is very important. Municipal legal services would provide advice on whether enforcement actions are permitted based on what is happening in that encampment. Whatever governing body that might be doing or wanting to do some enforcement, be it police, fire, building development, so on, whoever's involved, they would be consulting with our legal services. If the encampment remains, outreach services would continue to offer supports and engagement and try to work with people to find housing solutions. If it has to be dismantled, individuals would be given the opportunity for a voluntary dismantle and relocation with the assistance of the outreach team. Outreach is primarily performed by rock missions locally. We've had a lot of good success with that partnership, and have tested this out and used this where people were able to find other accommodations and move voluntarily. But that is getting increasingly difficult. That is just a high-level overview, but just to give you some background, there was a lot of work put into this plan and a lot of partnership and buy-in through multiple departments of the municipality who make up the committee. The first list here, Public Works, police, fire, building, parks, housing and employment, social services. And also we had important consultations with public health, individuals with lived experience, Reach Out Chatham-Kent, which is ROC, and Chatham-Hope Haven. Org Code Consulting did a lot of work with us and with the community on gathering information and doing environmental scans. And then we did our own environmental scans with some of our typical comparators to see. And a lot of communities are still grappling with this and do not have this in place yet. Just wanted to sort of reiterate that the protocols won't eliminate encampments. They don't solve all the problems with encampments. The team in housing services is working with all of the partners in the protocol to find ways to mitigate some of the problems and issues that arise at the same time while encampments are in place. Only new housing and increased wages and supports for people will end this situation. And I think I would like to open it to questions now, and probably, if it's all right, Dave would answer the legal questions and I can answer the protocol. But if anyone would like to speak about some of the other things that are going on to help with encampments, Kim Crew or Josh Myers could speak to that.
Yeah, I have a speakers list of a few with questions, so I'll start with that, and then if anybody else has any questions, Councillor Sakachi, followed by Councillor Doyle.
Thank you, Mayor Caniff. I guess just a quick question to Dave. Dave, just the reason why I'm asking this question is because this comes up on a very regular basis to myself, and I think it's beneficial to have a legal answer in the community. So a lot of residents, a lot of business owners are regularly asking when we basically refer to the law and why they can be allowed to stay. They want to know where their legal, basically parameters are because of the fact of some of the things that have caused significant challenges to their living arrangements because of encampments. And for instance, if you're in a house and you're just throwing garbage bag after garbage bag on the ground, chances are there's going to be ramifications to yourself. But how come there's not kind of the same type of ramifications for people who are causing significant challenges to other people's property?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you, Councillor, for the question. So, as I mentioned, there's a tremendous amount of individualized response and consideration that we need to give to the persons we're actually engaging with that might be facing housing crises or being unhoused. And so I can't really give you a general answer to any of those kind of general question about, why aren't these bylaws applied that might apply to a person who has a house or otherwise isn't in the same situation. But I can give just a very high level. I can't give a particular answer, but I can give you a high level to say, the court cases that we have here are saying certain bylaws that might apply in one situation aren't going to apply in another situation to somebody who's unhoused, because you need to recognize their individual circumstances. So talking about garbage, I can't exactly give that comparison, but if we talk about other things like camping in parks, it says Dave Taylor can't camp in a park because he has somewhere else to stay, but a person who's unhoused, they have no kind of backup option, so then they can camp in a park. That's their only backup option. That then means the parks bylaw doesn't really apply to that person, even though it does apply to me when it says you can't camp overnight. That same type of application might be needed to be applied to a lot of different bylaws. I can't get into every kind of specific, but that same type of analysis needs to be applied. So we have to think about the individual themselves facing that issue. If we're then talking about garbage, one of the problems that we certainly hear from businesses is kind of an encampment producing garbage, and it's often because, of course, there isn't a garbage pickup for that location because it's not intended to be a house or an apartment building or anything like that, but a number of people are staying there. And so that's one of the pieces that the encampment team is looking at internally, is what other services can we do to try to mitigate some of those impacts, and those will certainly have costs to them, but doing things like more regular pickup, working with different parts of our operations teams. So, if you have specific complaints, those can come to the the team, the encampment team, to kind of review, and we can try to help mitigate some of those. But broadly speaking, from a legal perspective, it's that individualized analysis per person has to be performed on whether a bylaw can be applied.
Yeah, thank you. I'm not going to take much more time at all, and I appreciate that. I guess it's just really hard to convey that to people when they're being impacted, their families are being, and by no means do I want to sound shallow with the people that are living in really challenging circumstances. But there's a couple things is that, the one thing I did when I read this encampment response, staff have done a great job at looking at ways to try to come up with solutions to these and how to handle them. But the one thing that I really think that's missing is this, like, obviously supporting the people that are in these challenging circumstances. That's the priority for sure. But unfortunately, what comes with these encampments and these types of challenges is significant collateral damage to the community around the encampments, from a crime perspective, from a drug use perspective, social aspects, and there's not a lot. The community feels there's not a lot of social supports in place for the people that are being significantly affected as well, either that be from a business or from a community perspective. So I definitely don't want to seem shallow by saying that, what the people that are living in encampments are going through far, far more. It's just that call the police, or if it's on, private property, this is the way to go. All the people that are reaching out to me are just basically saying this just isn't working. So I just want to, I just want to make sure I'm asking the question in open. And from a legal perspective, just, repeating it from your perspective, what you say to us is helpful to hear in open, because there's a lot of people that are at their wits' end from a business perspective, a homes perspective, and these are people that are treading that line of being able to pay their bills and maybe becoming homeless themselves. So, while we focus on the people that really need our support, there's also a lot of people that are being impacted that could find themselves in the same situation that have no supports whatsoever, right? So it's a really tough circumstance, and I do appreciate all the staffing time, but a lot of people just don't feel that there's enough being done all around, right? So.
Councillor Doyle, followed by Councillor Juvenville.
Thank you, Mayor. I would agree with everything that Councillor Saskatchewan has said. Great report, Polly. It's nice to get that out in public and see what the bylaws are and what the protocols are for public versus private land, to kind of get that out in the public. I will say from being in one of the encampments areas, I've been to that parking lot quite a few times. It's definitely over the last year, it seems to getting a lot worse. There's people in there and talking to the building beside it that some of the people use. A lot of people in that encampment don't even use that place. They're not able to use that place, and they don't want to use that place. And some of the spots that we have for shelter, they don't want to follow the rules to do that. So they're there. If you drive and sit in the parking lot, put your window down, it's not going to take long before you're going to hear a drug dealer. You're going to hear people, vulgar language, yelling and swearing at each other. And like, you get out of your car, like one time I got in my car, there's a guy shooting up 10 feet from me. Like, that's not what we should be having in a parking lot right beside a business. Again, I feel for the people, especially the people that want to get help, but there's also people that don't want to get help. And it's hard. It's hard when you have complaint after complaint and people that don't even want to walk by that parking lot anymore because they feel unsafe. We have people that don't want to go to that business anymore because they feel unsafe. And trust me, if you go and you sit in that parking lot for 5-10 minutes, you're going to know exactly what I'm talking about. So I do think it's come to a point where we need to do something, because this just isn't working. So we got to think outside the box and figure out something that's going to work for everybody, both the people in the encampment and the business owners and our general public that's just walking by. So thank you for the report, but I definitely think something needs to be done.
Councillor Juvenville.
Thank you, Mayor. I just have a couple, 3 or 4 questions. Do we know how many people there are that are living in the encampments across Chatham-Kent?
Good evening. Thank you, through Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Jubenville. At this time, we know that there are approximately 89 individuals who are declaring to be outside. The encampment numbers actually change daily. So, and our outreach partners would tell us that they can visit on one day and it could be different people that are there the next day. There's also a difference between people that are actually staying at those encampments versus people that visit them daily and then return to somewhere else to stay. But at this time, we know that 89 people are declaring to be outdoors.
Okay, thank you for that. And that's all across Chatham-Kent, correct?
Yes, correct.
Thank you. Do you feel that we will be able to help some of these individuals to find shelter or housing through the new response? Or is this more of an oversight program? Like, what's the premise of it? Just oversight, or is it actually to help?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, thank you, Councillor Jubenville, for your question. I think that the protocol will be helpful in some situations, and I think that it has proven successful in many circumstances. It's not maybe as obvious because we're able to go in, we're able to support, we're able to give them what they need, we're able to house them, and they're able to access different supports. The challenge is the complexity of some of the individuals that aren't interested in receiving the supports from us. And how do we help them? And how do we, to Councillor Doyle's point, how do we ensure that we are able to create environments that are acceptable to everybody? I don't know that there's ever going to be a perfect solution, but I think maybe there's something different that ought to be done. I don't have the answer as to what that might look like tonight, but I do think that the Encampment Committee needs to take that back and they need to look at what options may exist and how we might be able to do things perhaps a little differently.
Okay, thank you. It was mentioned that it's the onus is on the private property owners to clean up after an encampment, after it's removed from their private property. Is there any resources that we can provide for these private property owners? Because I struggle with the fact that whether it's, where they live or perhaps it's a private property that they don't access all the time, they might not know this encampment is there. And then it might take them a while to remove the encampment, and then they're left with the financial implications of removing it. Is it fair for us to not provide any assistance or resources to them to clean up, for lack of better words?
Sorry about that. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. The onus is on the property owner. There is currently no system that we would clean up private properties. So it is important for people to keep an eye on their private properties and be aware of what's happening. And what some do that are off-site or in another city is have property managers or even neighbors that are able to call in if there's an issue on their behalf. Now, I will say when things are close to some of our work that we're already doing, I've heard anecdotal information of staff helping, but generally no, and that would have to be a change in a decision of council to provide that service to private property owners.
Okay, thank you. Just two more questions. It was mentioned about the Crown land that you would defer it back to the province or the federal government. So does that mean that if there is an encampment on Crown land that we don't involve ourselves with it, or we do, or how is that handled if it's on Crown land?
Thank you. That's a good question. We would get that information. The information would probably come to us. We would approach the managers or whoever's in charge of that building or property, and then we could still, if they were interested in doing the same protocol that's the voluntary protocol of private property with outreach coming out, we could still provide all of that service. So we would assist if they wished, but ultimately it's their decision.
Okay, so if it's let's say the riverbank, so that would be Crown land, I would assume. So that So who would you reach out to? Would that be us, or would it be the province, or how would we handle that?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So just to the riverbank question, it's actually not cut and dry. Some of it's privately property owned, some of it's owned by the municipality. It really depends on what it is. But I think that the best approach really is to be working through the protocol and that contact information. We can do some review to determine who the ownership is. That sometimes is a question, whether it's even on municipal land or private land.
Okay, and last question. I do know the answer, but just as for the public, some municipalities have started up municipal encampments to oversee the encampment. So is that anything that our municipality would consider, having a municipal encampment?
So through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Jubenville, very good question. It is something that we have had conversations about. There are risks associated with what I'll call perhaps a sanctioned encampment that need to be considered. And there's some ramifications that we need to talk through a little bit more. I don't know if that's the best approach. I don't know if that's the best resolution to the issues that we have here within Chatham-Kent, but it's certainly an option that we're aware of. And the committee needs to talk that through a little bit more to identify what the best possible solution is for us. So perhaps, but there will be some considerations with that, or there might be some alternative options that we could consider.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Bondi.
Thank you, Mayor Caniff. I don't know where this question, comment, suggestion goes. It's sort of along the lines of what Councillor Jubenville was saying. From what I can understand, and I was at the meeting last Thursday with some of the business guys downtown, and the police were there, and they were very honest and frank about what they can't do, which is anything, by the sounds of it. So that was encouraging to hear that sort of honesty. You know, they just said, like, our hands are tied. Like, there's nothing that we can really do. So what was discussed, and really, I think, like, we have to kind of take the gloves off here because this has become a crisis. And I know when people do things, it's not hurting anybody else. Well, this is hurting other people, for sure. Like, I walked by the parking lot encampment in downtown Chatham last Friday night at about 11:30. Not on purpose. I was just walking home, actually. And one of the business guys was outside, so he gave me a little tour at a distance. And yeah, it's pretty wild, not in a good way. But I guess what my question is, and the reason I'm bringing this forward is this was discussed last Thursday. If we were to designate an area, which I guess could be fraught with problems and liabilities, but if that's possible, and we'll just say Park A, whatever, I have no clue where this would be, but if we were to do that, what I understood was that we then would have the ability to physically remove people because we are providing somewhere for them to go. Is that's a very simplified, I know it's not that simple, I'm sure, but, you know, after 20 minutes of 20 people talking at the same time, that's sort of where it seemed to kind of land, maybe. So is that, you know, I see like in Toronto and Vancouver where they clear encampments out of parks or from under the Don Valley or something. Now maybe the Supreme Court has changed that, and that may have been a while ago. But would that work if we did have an area that we maybe provide some services for, maybe none? But would that give us the ability? What I'm looking for is just like, you know, what's the way to fix this? Not being nice about it necessarily, because it's not a nice situation. But would that work if we did have a designated place, so therefore we are providing a place for an encampment? You know, I'm just trying to get to the simplified version of this. Like, would that do it? There may not be the political will to do it, but there is sitting here. But it's kind of the question.
Thank you, Councillor.
Mr. Dubin, you wanted to say something?
Yeah, thank you, Your Worship. So Mr. Taylor's probably going to say to you, it depends, because that's usually what lawyers say.
And you are a lawyer.
But I think it really does depend. And I think that what Jody just talked about is we actually had a meeting just this morning to talk about that. And I think it's a bit too soon for us to be able to answer some of those questions publicly until we can actually evaluate it. So the comment was made, I think, by Councillor Jubenville that some other municipalities have designated areas. I think some of them have talked about it, and not sure all of them have actually gone towards that yet. We are aware of which municipalities those are. We will be talking to those municipalities to see what some of their challenges are and how their fact situations differ from ours. And we'll be bringing back a report addressing that very issue about whether or not we can have sort of a, and I don't know if, even right now, I'm uncomfortable calling it sanctioned, because I don't know what we'd end up calling it. What we call it may be very important, and we don't know that yet. So I guess I will say we understand that there's an imbalance, and that all of you are probably struggling, especially with the businesses downtown. So we're not foreign to that. We completely understand it. But in order to give you advice as council, we need a little bit of time to do a bit more legwork. I will say that the protocol that you've heard today has been successful on occasion. You may recall when Prince Michael was here, there were some concerns about one of our bridges. We were able to deal with that. So this is a moving situation. The law is changing regularly. What other municipalities are doing successfully or unsuccessfully is changing regularly. So for the police to say to Councillor Bondi that there's nothing they can do, there's nothing they can do in the fact scenario that exists today. But some of you may not know this. We had a fire today at one of our encampments outside of the Rona, and we found some propane cylinders there. So things can change tomorrow whereby we can come forward and tell you that there's something you can do. So I just want everybody to be aware that this is fluid. And we understand that, you know, we're under a lot of pressure to try to, you know, balance everybody's needs. So we will come back with a report on this whole issue of some sort of, you know, is it possible to have some sort of a location? A couple of months ago, when that question would have been asked of Mr. Taylor, he would say no, because the law didn't support that. But quite frankly, we only had one case at that time. We had the Waterloo case, if I'm not mistaken. Since then, we've had multiple cases as well. So we're just gonna have to adjust, and I hate to use the word to be patient, because I understand the businesses have been imminently patient, but we're working on it. We will come back with some advice to council in terms of what to do specifically about the parking lot, and I wouldn't be surprised if between now and then another scenario comes up that might take a different solution.
Thank you, Mayor Caniff. So just to ease the minds of the people that are affected, which extends far beyond the business owners downtown, there's guys like me, I live a couple of blocks from downtown, and I experience this. So I guess what I'm asking is, when we say, you know, we'll come back with the report, and please be patient, the patience is pretty well exhausted. So can we and the summer's just starting, right? This is obviously much more of an issue in the summer. There's more daylight, people are outside, they experience the outdoors, you know, everybody, it's always a bigger problem in the summertime with this kind of thing. So can you, this will be one of those depend answers, I think, or maybe, but any timeline on when we could possibly expect, not a solution, because that doesn't exist, but action?
Yeah, I mean, I called a meeting just this morning and asked everybody to go away and see what they can come up with. So I guess I'll have to turn over the timeline to Jody and her team. We do know which municipalities are looking at that option. We will contact them. I know Ms. Cruz is planning on doing that. So Jody, can you comment on what the timeline would be in terms of report back to council?
Sure, through you, Mr. Mayor. We can commit to bringing a report back in September. It'll take us a little bit of time to really do a bit of a jurisdictional scan, and with summer holidays, we need to make sure we have the right people at the table having the conversations with us. So we'll bring a report back in September.
Yeah, but I will say, having said that, if there is a situation that, you know, with advice from legal or, you know, fire safety issues, there may be a situation where we have to react right away because of you know, safety to the public kind of situations. And I think Mr. Taylor has already spoken to council a little bit about what kind of situations might have to exist today based on the current case law we know today for us to be able to take action. So we will definitely keep an eye on that. So I don't want it to mean that there's absolutely nothing that will happen between now and there's a council report. It just sort of depends on, I hate to use the words it depends again, but it sort of depends on what situations we're dealing with. We haven't had a chance to really even deal with today's situation. I think that fire was around 3 o'clock today, so we haven't even had a chance to, caucus on that yet to see whether or not we handle that situation differently. So while the report may come in September, I just want people to know we're not going to turn a blind eye to public safety either.
Okay, probably not what they want to hear, but that's the answer. Okay, thank you.
Councillor B. McGregor.
Thank you, Mayor Caniff. Certainly appreciate the hard work of Employment and Social Services and our community partners in facing what's a growing issue in Chatham-Kent. And I admit it is frustrating to revisit these issues often, and they seem to have a really common theme. The municipalities are bearing a larger burden in dealing with community issues, and that's certainly changed over the past 10 years. I don't have any questions, but whenever I see a report like this, I think it is an opportunity to again bring up that this is the outcome of 10 years of policy failure on social supports, access to healthcare, access to mental health services, access to addiction services. So while we may receive those complaints as municipal councillors, we're very close to the ground, and certainly frontline staff receive those complaints. We need to make sure that we're advocating for real solutions. That will take quite a long time. I know Councillor Crew and I talked about it before the meeting. I don't know that you could put a dollar amount on what would start to solve this problem, but we definitely need to make sure that we're advocating to the right levels of government to look for solutions. Thank you.
Okay, seeing no other questions, we will move to item 21, Chief Administrative Office.
21B, motion by Councillor Sakachi regarding support for primary health care access points.
Councillor Scotchy.
Thank you, Mayor Caniff. Got to read the whole thing, or just what's up on the board is okay? That administration investigate and report back on the creative ways to support and or incentivize the development of primary care access points. The report should provide suggestions, recommendations for the role of the municipality and consider incentive options with an impact to future budgets. And if I have a seconder, I'll just explain very briefly.
Councillor Anderson.
Yep, I'm happy to second that.
Thank you, Mayor Caniff. Just a couple quick comments. Back before in the budgetary process, there used to be some money that was allocated to try to basically recruit doctors. This motion is a little bit different. Where I was hoping to go was some basically some consultation that I had in Blenheim. There's a community hub that's opening up in Blenheim, and it was just really inspiring to see all the different roles that the community's paying, corporate partners are playing, large donations from different members of the community, and establishing a potential state-of-the-art facility in Blenheim. And that was going to help our entire municipality. So what this is just basically saying is there ways that we can actually incentivize bricks and mortar, locations in our community that are, and have our community that will benefit. And just in closing, like we have different programs in place for apartment buildings. And if you ask 50 people to say, would you support tax incentives for apartment building growth? If you ask 50 people, maybe 20 of them would say, yeah, that's a great idea. But if you ask 50 people if they would support some potential, impacts of their taxation, if we could establish, actually have new family doctors or medical providers come to our community, I'm sure that almost every single one would say yes. There's no actual potential, there's no actual budget implications right now. This is just allowing, potentially Gord and Jody's team to have conversations with different hubs that might be interested in locating in our community and try to establish maybe some framework that says, if you actually locate here, maybe here's something that we can do for you. I know that there is not a discount, but there is taxation changes that's already allowed. But I think that we need to do whatever we can to incentivize more health partners. And I think that we're doing a lot, but I don't think we're doing quite enough. So just looking forward to maybe some collaboration and some communication to help try to establish some more physicians in our community.
Seeing no other questions, then we'll put it to vote.
Councillor Allen
Yes.
and Councillor McGrail.
Yes.
All votes are in and motion passes 17-0.
We'll move on to notice of motion. Councillor Sakachi, then Councillor Allen.
Thank you, Mayor Caniff. I, Councillor Anthony Sakachi, hereby provide notice that I'll be bringing the following motion for a voting discussion. Whereas the Municipal Act as amended authorizes municipalities to pass bylaws for the economic, social, and environmental well-being of the municipality, and whereas for these reasons it's appropriate to require owners or occupants of private property to cut the grass and weeds on their land or to remove cuttings whenever the growth of grass exceeds a specific level, and whereas recently there has been significant changes to curbside collection and a significant increase in the complaints regarding bulk garbage storage and disposal, and whereas repeat offenders under these bylaws and legislations by property owners is common, and whereas Chatham-Kent is now being identified as a place to growth where a significant amount of property is being purchased by investors that are not present in the area and the land they purchase may lay dormant and unmonitored, be it resolved that staff draft a report to council looking at ways to improve, strengthen, and increase the bylaw system for long grass, obnoxious weeds, and curbside collections, identify deficiencies, and look at the current system and staff levels of bylaw enforcement of these services for efficiencies, and identify ways to increase the severity of punitive action in the system in a way that repeat offenders see significant increases in charges and reduced rates of time for compliance to improve the overall quality of our community, and look at ways to recover the costs so those who are not compliant are responsible for the additional budgetary costs.
Councillor Allen.
I, Councillor Connor Allen, will hereby bring the following motion on June 24th for discussion and voting. Be it resolved that as part of the Transportation Mobility Master Plan, staff review the feasibility of converting portions of King Street in downtown Chatham to one-way and introducing angled parking, including undertaking consultation with the BIA, businesses, and public, and report back to council with recommendations, including the feasibility and financial implications.
Okay, thank you. We'll go to closed session reports. Councillor Crew?
Mayor. Okay, I have two. I have May 27th and today. So start with May 27th. Council directed administration on a personnel matter about an identifiable individual with regard to the library board appointment, section 239(2)B of the Municipal Act 2001, and a proposed disposition of land by the municipality with regard to offer to purchase part of the property identification number 008300040 Wheatley Road, Community of Tilbury, section 239(2)C of the Municipal Act 2001. Council received information on potential litigation advice that is subject to solicitor-client privilege and a position, plan, procedure, criteria, or instruction to be applied to any negotiations carried on by the municipality with regard to contract performance issues, section 239(2)E, F, and K of the Municipal Act, and personnel matters about identifiable individuals with regard to respectful workplace update, section 239(2)B of the Municipal Act 2001. Monday, June 10th, Council directed administration on a position, plan, procedure, criteria, or instruction to be applied to any negotiation carried on by the municipality with regard to the land ambulance service contract, section 239(2)K of the Municipal Act, and council received information on litigation and advice that is subject to solicitor-client privilege with regard to 2023 claims and litigation update, section 239(2)E and F of the Municipal Act. I so move.
Councillor Thompson, can I second that?
So seconded.
Seeing no questions, we'll put it to vote.
Councillor Allen
Yes.
and Councillor McGrail.
Yes.
All votes are in. Motion passes 17-0.
Councillor B. McGregor and Councillor C. McGregor, can I get you to move the communication items, please?
So moved.
Seconded.
Anyone opposed? Communication items carry. Reading of, non-agenda business. Councillor Bondi, followed by Councillor Finn.
Thank you, Mayor Caniff. I just have a question. That beach bus, does anybody know, or is it posted somewhere what the dates are, times, blah, blah, blah? I just had a couple people ask me and I said, I have no idea, so. And I looked, but I didn't look hard enough. Or just where I could find it.
Through you, I don't know that we've got it posted yet, but I can certainly follow up on that and share that information soon. Yeah.
Okay, great. By tomorrow? I said, I'll tell you tomorrow. So, but yeah, whenever works, great. Thanks.
Councillor Finn, followed by Councillor McDonald.
Just to advise everybody that tomorrow and Wednesday, the 2024 Special Olympics Ontario School Championship Games are taking place. Athletes from around the province between the ages of 14 and 21 will be participating in 5 sports, that being basketball, soccer, track and field, floor hockey, and bocce ball. There's different locations. Basketball and bocce ball will be in Richtown at the high school and the college. Soccer and floor hockey will be at St. Clair College, and track and field will be at CKSS. Opening and closing ceremonies will take place at the Bradley Center. Last time this event was held, and I was there, was 27 years ago. It's quite an event. It's worth taking some time and go support these athletes.
Councillor McDonald, followed by Councillor Wright.
Thank you, Mayor Caniff. Councillor Finn did a great job of explaining what I was about to talk about, but I just wanted to welcome the hundreds of athletes who are coming to Ridgetown specifically. I was at the college this morning helping to set up, and it'll be really busy in our area over the next 2 days. Thanks.
Councillor Wright, followed by Councillor Anderson.
Thank you, Mayor Caniff. They're still looking for volunteers for the Special Olympics, and I know in Ridgetown they told them just to show up at the Rudy Brown building over the next 2 days and they'll find them a job. So anybody who wants to volunteer, they're more than welcome to come out. The other thing, maybe this is for engineering through you, Mayor, the Dillon overpass, have you heard anything on yet what happened out on, is it shut down or?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, yes, it is, the MTO will be coming out to review it, and so we're waiting for them to do that before we can reopen it to traffic.
Oh, okay, thank you.
Councillor Anderson, followed by Mr. Dubin.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I just wanted to congratulate all the youth that received the Youth Community Recognition Award through their public schools. And I wanted to give a round of applause to our mayor. There were several students that weren't able to be there, and he is making his rounds to each school to personally present those awards to those students that were unable to attend. So thank you, Mr. Mayor. I know that it means a lot to these kids that are doing great things around their community to not only be recognized at a public forum, say at the Capitol Theater, but maybe even more importantly, with their peers in their classroom. So it's much appreciated. Thank you.
Mr. Dubin?
Yeah, thank you, Your Worship. So I'll include something in the correspondence package for the next council meeting, but I just wanted to let everybody know that the Western Ontario Wardens Caucus and MMAH, they usually have a Western Ontario Municipal Conference every year. They've moved away from that, obviously, during COVID. They're starting it up again. So if you want to mark it in your calendars, October 25th, basically all day at the Bradley Center. So it's being hosted right here in Chatham-Kent, which is really kind of cool. We are not doing much to host it. It's really just the province, but they're having it here. And so all councillors and senior staff are invited. They're expecting around 300 or so participants. So I'll get some more details out, but you won't get a formal invitation, but everyone's invited to attend, and you'll figure out how to sign up for the conference. Thank you.
I just want to follow up on what Councillor Anderson said, that it was great to celebrate about 48 youth in our community. Each school was asked to nominate somebody. So got to meet as the travels. There's a lot of pretty amazing kids out there, and that's our future, and it's great to see them getting involved, and hope to get a lot more of them involved. And it's something that I think the not-for-profits and the charities and anybody who relies on volunteers should be really tapping in and following that, created as a draft class to say, look, there's all these amazing young men and women coming up. So with that, we'll move into the first and second reading. Councillor Finn and Councillor McGrail. Can I each move that, please?
Happy to move it.
Anyone opposed? Motion carried. Third and final reading. Councillor McDonald and Councillor Jubenville.
I'll move
third final reading. Can I each move that?
Yes, I'll move it.
And I will second.
Anyone opposed? Motion carries. Okay, I think what we'll do is for the closing of council, we'll end it the right way and go to Councillor Wright to bada bing. Councillor Crew?
I move that Chatham-Kent Council adjourn to its next meeting to be held on Monday, June 24th, 2024, and that Chatham-Kent Council authorize itself to meet in closed session on that day to discuss any matters permitted by the municipal act. I so move.
Thank you, Mayor. I'll second that.
Anyone opposed to 8:17? I will never doubt Meredith again. I asked her what time was going to finish, meeting was going to finish, and she said 8:15. So she's pretty darn good at the, she would have won almost the bonus prize at Price is Right. So, yeah. Have a great night, everyone.